The sky above Earth changed forever on a quiet Tuesday morning in May 2075. Humanity had spread through the solar system, with colonies on Mars and research stations on Europa and Titan. People went about their normal lives, not knowing that everything was about to change. John Baker stood on the observation deck of Lunar Base Alpha, his eyes fixed on the blue marble of Earth. At 34, the Navy lieutenant had earned a reputation as one of the best test pilots in the service. His short brown hair was always neatly trimmed and his blue eyes missed nothing. A scar ran along his right forearm, a reminder of the experimental aircraft crash he had somehow survived 5 years ago. "Lieutenant Baker, report to command immediately," a voice announced over the speaker system. John frowned. He wasn't scheduled for a test flight today. Something was happening. In the command center, screens showed strange objects approaching Earth. Admiral Steve Wilson, a stern man with gray hair and thick eyebrows, pointed at the largest display. "Baker, we've detected multiple objects dropping out of what appears to be faster than light travel. They're slowing down and entering Earth orbit. We need our best people on this, and you're at the top of the list." John studied the images. The objects were sleek, crystal-like ships that seemed to shimmer as they moved. Aliens? Actual aliens? "First contact," Admiral Wilson confirmed. "The President has authorized a diplomatic welcome team. You're on it." "Why me, sir? I'm a pilot, not a diplomat." "Because you stay calm under pressure, Baker. And if these visitors have bad intentions, I want someone who can think fast." Within hours, John found himself on a shuttle heading back to Earth. He sat across from other hastily assembled team members, including Dr. Alan Foster, a linguistics expert with thick glasses and nervous hands. "Any progress talking to them?" John asked. Dr. Foster nodded excitedly. "They sent transmissions in mathematical sequences first, then began using our own radio signals to communicate. They call themselves the Veldari. They're saying they want peaceful contact." The meeting point was a military base in Nevada. When John stepped onto the tarmac, he saw the alien craft up close. It was beautiful, like a teardrop made of crystal, hovering silently above the ground. The delegation of humans waited nervously as a door appeared in the seamless hull. 3 figures emerged. John's first thought was that they looked almost like glass sculptures of humans. The Veldari were tall and slender, with skin so pale it was nearly transparent. Their large eyes had no pupils, just swirling colors that shifted like oil on water. They moved with careful, deliberate steps. The center alien raised a 6-fingered hand in greeting. "We bring peace and knowledge to Earth," it said in perfect English, though its mouth didn't move in sync with the words. "I am Zelthron, ambassador of the Veldari Collective." The President's representative stepped forward with a rehearsed welcome speech. John stood back, watching. Something felt off about the aliens. They moved cautiously, as if each step required calculation. Later, during the formal reception, John found himself face to face with Zelthron. The alien's head tilted curiously. "You are different from the others," Zelthron observed. "Your physical structure indicates you have survived significant trauma." John raised an eyebrow. "You can tell that just by looking at me? Our species has studied many forms of life. You bear the signs of having survived conditions that should have been fatal. This is unusual for specimens from high-gravity worlds." "Specimens?" John questioned. Zelthron's colors shifted briefly. "A translation error. I meant individuals. Your language is still new to us." Over the next few days, more Veldari ships arrived. They established an embassy in Washington, D.C., and offered to share knowledge about space travel, medicine, and energy production. World leaders were excited by the possibilities. John, now assigned as military liaison to the Veldari, attended numerous meetings. During one session about Earth's environmental conditions, he noticed how the aliens kept referring to Earth's extreme parameters. "Your species evolved in these crushing gravity conditions?" one Veldari scientist asked. Genuine surprise in its voice. "Earth's gravity isn't crushing to us," John replied. "It's normal." The aliens exchanged looks. Of course, normal for Deathworlders. What did you call us? John asked sharply. It is merely a classification term, Zelthron explained quickly. Planets are categorized by their habitability parameters. Earth falls into a category that would be challenging for most spacefaring species. That night, John couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the term Deathworlders and the way the Veldari moved so carefully on Earth. He accessed the base computer and began researching everything known about the visitors. The Veldari had shared information about their homeworld, a planet with lower gravity than Earth, thinner atmosphere, and less temperature variation. In their images, the Veldari moved with flowing grace, almost dancing across their world's surface. Lieutenant Baker? John turned to find a young woman in civilian clothes standing in the doorway of the research room. She had curly red hair and freckles across her nose. I'm Susan Miller, she said. Agricultural scientist. I've been analyzing the biological data the Veldari shared and something doesn't add up. What do you mean? John asked. Susan sat down next to him, her green eyes intense. They're collecting soil and plant samples, but not for the reasons they claim. I think they're studying how life adapts to Earth's conditions, not how to help our crops. John nodded slowly. They called us Deathworlders, like they're amazed we can survive here. Exactly, Susan said. And have you noticed how they never stay on Earth for more than 6 hours at a time? They always return to their ships. John pulled up security footage of Veldari visitors. Susan was right. They rotated personnel regularly, and when they thought no one was watching, they moved with strain, as if Earth itself was weighing them down. What if, John said slowly, their interest in us isn't about friendship at all? What if they're studying us like scientists study animals in extreme environments? Susan's expression grew serious. And what happens when scientists finish studying animals? Before John could answer, his secure phone beeped. It was Admiral Wilson. Baker, get to the command center now. 20 people have disappeared near the Veldari research outpost in Colorado. No explanation, no trace. John looked at Susan. I think we're about to find out their real intentions. I'm coming with you, she said, standing up. They've been asking strange questions about human physiology in my department too. I think we need to compare notes. As they hurried down the hallway, a Veldari observer watched them from around a corner, its swirling eyes tracking their movement. It tapped a communication device on its wrist. Alert the core ship, it whispered. Some of the specimens are showing concerning levels of awareness. Accelerate the collection schedule. The command center buzzed with activity when John and Susan arrived. Screens showed satellite images of the Colorado research site. 20 people had vanished without a trace. The Veldari claim they know nothing about this, Admiral Wilson said, his face grim. They suggest a landslide might have buried the missing people. John studied the images. There's no sign of a landslide, sir. I know that, the Admiral snapped. But the President doesn't want to accuse our new alien friends without solid proof. Susan stepped forward. Sir, I've been analyzing the soil samples the Veldari have been collecting. They're not studying agriculture. They're measuring how Earth life adapts to high gravity and atmospheric pressure. Admiral Wilson frowned. What are you suggesting, Dr. Miller? I think they see Earth as an extreme environment, Susan explained. A death world, they called it. They seem amazed that we can live here. That's interesting, but doesn't explain the missing people, the Admiral said. It might, John argued. If they view us as specimens that evolved in extreme conditions, maybe they're collecting humans for study. The Admiral's phone rang. After a brief conversation, his expression darkened. There's been another incident. 15 people missing, near the Veldari outpost in Brazil. John's jaw tightened. We need to investigate. The President has ordered us to stand down, Admiral Wilson said quietly. The Veldari are offering technology that could solve climate change, disease, even aging. No one wants to risk that. So we just ignore people disappearing? John asked. The Admiral looked at him sharply. Officially, yes. Unofficially, I need someone to look into this without drawing attention. John nodded. I understand, sir. I'm going too, Susan added. I might notice things others would miss. They left for the Colorado site immediately. The area had been cordoned off, with Veldari security drones patrolling alongside human military personnel. "We need to get closer to their research building," John whispered as they observed from a distance. Susan pointed to a supply truck approaching the checkpoint. "That might be our way in." They slipped past the guards and hid in the back of the truck. Inside the compound, they saw Veldari scientists moving between buildings, their movements slow and careful in Earth's gravity. John and Susan made their way to a side entrance of the main facility. Using the access card Admiral Wilson had provided, they slipped inside. The interior was kept at low gravity, making John and Susan feel strangely light as they moved. They heard Veldari voices from a nearby room and quietly approached. Through a small window in the door, they saw 3 Veldari examining human items: a hammer, a baseball, and a handgun. "The primitive weapons are most concerning," one Veldari said. "In this gravity, the recoil energy alone would damage our bone structure. Yet the Deathworlders handle it with ease." Another Veldari picked up the hammer. "Their tools are designed for beings with incredible physical strength. A Veldari, using this would risk serious injury." "Has the core ship approved expanded collection?" the third asked. "Yes. The High Council wishes to study more specimens, particularly those with military training. Their physical capabilities in high gravity could pose concerns." Susan gasped softly. John pulled her away from the door just as a Veldari looked up. They moved deeper into the facility, finding a data terminal. Susan pulled out a device and connected it to the alien computer. "Can you access their files?" John asked. "I think so. One of their scientists, Telmora, showed me how their systems work." He seemed more interested in cultural exchange than the others. Susan's fingers moved quickly over the device. "I'm in. There's so much data here. Wait." She pointed to a file, labeled Earth Habitat Conversion. "Look at this, John. It's a plan to transform parts of Earth to match Veldari homeworld conditions." John read the details and felt cold. "They're planning to reduce Earth's gravity and thin the atmosphere in
stages.
That would kill most Earth life, including humans," Susan whispered. "Unless we're kept in controlled habitats, as they call them." John scrolled through more files. "Here's something about specimen collection. They're abducting humans to study how we survive in what they consider extreme conditions." Susan downloaded the files as John kept watch. "They mention a core ship several times. It seems to be their main vessel, where they're taking the captured humans." An alarm suddenly blared through the facility. "We've been detected," John said. "We need to move." They ran through the corridors, feeling their bodies grow heavier as they left the low-gravity area. 2 Veldari security officers appeared ahead, holding slender weapons. "Stop, humans," one called. John charged forward, his Earth-adapted muscles propelling him with a speed that seemed to surprise the Veldari. He tackled the first alien, who crumpled under the impact with a cry of pain. The second Veldari fired its weapon. A blue, energy pulse hit the wall as John dodged. Susan grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and sprayed it at the Veldari, who stumbled back, seemingly disoriented by the chemical cloud. "Their bodies are fragile in our gravity," John realized as they ran past. They made it outside and hid behind a storage building. Veldari and human security forces were searching the area. "We need to get this information to Admiral Wilson," Susan said, clutching the download device. John nodded. "But we can't trust official channels. The Veldari might be monitoring them." "I know someone who can help," Susan replied. "A communications expert named Lisa Rodriguez. She works at the lab where I met Telmora." They slipped away from the compound under cover of darkness, using the forest as camouflage. John noticed that Susan kept pace with him easily despite the rough terrain. "You move well for a scientist," he commented. Susan smiled slightly. "I grew up on a farm in Ohio, spent my summers hiking the Appalachian Trail." They reached their vehicle, hidden a mile away, and drove toward the nearest town. John kept checking the mirrors for pursuit. "The Veldari see us as animals," Susan said quietly. "Interesting specimens that evolved in what they consider impossible conditions." And they want to change those conditions to suit themselves, John added. Turn Earth into a vacation spot for rich aliens while keeping some humans as zoo exhibits. We need to warn people, Susan said. John's phone rang. It was Admiral Wilson. Baker, where are you? The Veldari ambassador just lodged a formal complaint about unauthorized personnel at their Colorado facility. They're demanding you be handed over for questioning. Sir, we found proof they're abducting humans, and they plan to terraform Earth to match their homeworld. Silence on the line. Then, that's a serious accusation, Lieutenant. Do you have evidence? Yes, sir. We downloaded files from their system. Get back to base immediately. Use the secure entrance. I'll meet you there. John ended the call and looked at Susan. Something doesn't feel right. What do you mean? The Admiral didn't sound surprised. And how did he know I was involved in the break-in? The Veldari couldn't have identified us that quickly. Susan's eyes widened. You think they've gotten to him? To our government? John turned the car around. We're not going back to base. We need to find somewhere safe to examine these files and figure out what to do next. As they drove away, a Veldari scout ship passed overhead, its searchlights scanning the ground below. The hunt had begun. John drove through the night, taking back roads to avoid detection. Susan sat beside him examining the stolen data on her tablet. This is worse than we thought, she said. The Veldari have been planning this for years. They've observed Earth from a distance before making contact. What about the people they've taken? John asked. Susan's face grew pale. They're being held on the core ship in Earth orbit. The files say they're undergoing adaptive testing to see how humans function in different gravity and atmospheric conditions. They reached a small motel outside Denver just before dawn. John checked in using cash and a fake name he had used during covert missions. Once inside the room, they spread their findings on the bed. Susan pulled up a map showing Veldari outposts around the world. Each outpost has taken people, she said. And look at this timeline. They're accelerating their collection schedule. John studied a document about Earth governments. The Veldari have offered world leaders something called cellular preservation therapy. It's basically immortality. That's how they've bought cooperation. Susan nodded grimly. We need help. I'm going to contact Lisa Rodriguez. If anyone can get a secure message out, it's her. Using a prepaid phone they had purchased at a gas station, Susan called her friend. She put the call on speaker. Susan, where are you? Everyone's looking for you. Lisa's voice sounded worried. Lisa, I need your help. Don't tell anyone we talked. Can you meet us? There was a pause. This is about the Veldari, isn't it? I've noticed strange patterns in their communications. Yes. We have proof they're not here peacefully. They're abducting people and planning to transform Earth. Lisa lowered her voice. I'm not the only one who suspects something. Meet me at Frank Williams' place. He's an ex-Marine who's been tracking Veldari movements. I'll text you the address. Frank's home was a cabin in the woods outside Boulder. When they arrived, they found Lisa already there with Frank, a muscular man with a buzz cut, and another man introduced as Greg Thompson, a physicist who had worked on reverse engineering Veldari technology. Welcome to the Resistance, Frank said, not smiling. Small as it is. Inside, the cabin's basement had been converted into a command center with computers, communication equipment, and maps marking Veldari activity. We've been gathering information for weeks, Lisa explained. The Veldari encrypt everything, but I've managed to crack some of their transmissions. Greg pointed to a screen showing technical diagrams. Their technology is amazing, but I've found weaknesses. The Veldari evolved on a low-gravity world with minimal atmospheric pressure. Their bodies are actually quite fragile by our standards. Frank nodded. I've seen it firsthand. During a joint security exercise, a Veldari fell and broke its arm just from the impact with the ground. What would be a minor fall for us was devastating to it. That matches what we saw, John said, describing how easily the Veldari security officer had crumpled when tackled. Susan connected her tablet to Greg's computer, transferring the stolen files. This should fill in a lot of gaps in our knowledge. As Greg analyzed the data, Frank showed John his weapons collection. Standard guns won't work against their shields, but I've been experimenting with alternatives. John picked up a strange-looking rifle. What's this? Modified railgun. It uses electromagnetic force instead of chemical explosives to fire projectiles. Their shields have trouble stopping solid objects moving at extremely high speeds. Lisa called them back to the main room. You need to see this. I've intercepted a transmission from the core ship. On the screen, they watched a recording of Zelthran speaking to what appeared to be a council of Veldari leaders. The Deathworlders present a unique challenge, the ambassador said. Their bodies have adapted to conditions we consider lethal. One human escaped our security forces by simply running faster than our officers could pursue in Earth gravity. Another Veldari spoke. Are they a threat to the transformation plan? Not technologically, Zelthran replied. Their weapons are primitive. However, their physical capabilities are concerning. A Deathworlder in Veldari gravity could cause significant damage before being subdued. Then we accelerate the timeline, the council leader decided. Begin atmospheric thinning in the designated test regions immediately, and increase security at all collection points. The transmission ended. The room was silent for a moment. They're afraid of us physically, John realized. All their advanced technology, and they're scared of what our bodies can do in their environment. That gives us an advantage, Frank said, but we're still outgunned. Their ships have weapons that could wipe out entire cities. Greg looked up from his computer. According to these files, all Veldari operations are coordinated through the core ship. It houses their leadership and main communication array, if we could disable it. With what? Lisa asked. We can't exactly fly up there and knock on the door. John was quiet for a moment. Then he said, maybe we can. During my time as a test pilot, I flew an experimental aircraft called the XV-87 Hummingbird. It was designed to operate in variable gravity environments, including very high G situations. What happened to it? Frank asked. The project was shut down. The physical strain on pilots was too extreme. Most washed out of the program. I was one of the few who could handle it. Susan looked at him with new understanding. That's why the Veldari were so interested in you. You survived conditions that should have been fatal. John nodded. The XV-87 prototype should still be in storage at Barksdale Air Force Base. If we could get it and modify it with what we know about Veldari technology. I could help with that, Greg offered. Their shield technology has specific vulnerabilities to certain types of kinetic impacts. Frank's eyes lit up. And I could integrate weapon systems, something that uses the craft's momentum to manage recoil. A flying gun, Lisa said. One that only a human from Earth could possibly pilot. Susan pulled up a map on her tablet. According to these files, the Veldari are planning to begin atmospheric thinning operations in 3 days, starting with North America. They've installed devices at these 5 locations. John studied the map. That's not much time. We need to move fast and stay under the radar. Frank opened a cabinet and handed out communications devices. These are secure. Veldari can't track them. We'll split up and meet at my backup location near Barksdale. As they prepared to leave, they heard vehicles approaching outside. Frank checked the security cameras. Government SUVs, they found us. The Veldari must have tracked your call, Greg said to Susan. John moved to the window. Is there another way out? Frank nodded. Underground tunnel leads to a garage about a quarter-mile away. There's a jeep there. Lisa grabbed a hard drive. I've copied everything, let's go. They hurried to the tunnel entrance hidden behind a bookshelf. As they descended, they heard the front door crash open above them. How did they find us so quickly? Susan whispered. John's expression was grim. I think we're about to find out how deep the Veldari influence goes. The underground tunnel was dark and narrow. John led the way with a small flashlight while Frank covered their rear. They moved quickly, the sounds of pursuit fading behind them. Who were they? Susan asked as they hurried along. Special forces, Frank replied grimly. Probably under direct Veldari control. The aliens have inserted their technology into key military and government personnel. They reached the end of the tunnel and climbed up into a small garage hidden in the woods. Inside was an old military jeep. "Everyone in," Frank ordered. "It's not comfortable, but it's fast and off-road capable." They drove through forest trails for hours, avoiding main roads. Lisa used her equipment to scan for tracking. "Signals, I think we're clear," she said finally. "But we need to be careful. Every electronic device could give us away." They switched vehicles twice over the next day, using contacts from Frank's military days. By nightfall, they reached a small airfield 50 miles from Barksdale Air Force Base. "We can't just drive up to the front gate," John said as they gathered in an abandoned hangar. "The XV-87 will be in high-security storage." Greg studied the base schematics he had downloaded. "There's an underground storage facility here labeled Project Hummingbird. That must be where they keep it." "How do we get in?" Susan asked. Lisa smiled slightly. "I have access codes. Part of my job was maintaining secure communications with all military installations. They haven't locked me out of the system yet. Even with codes, there will be guards," Frank warned. John nodded. "We need a distraction. Something to draw attention away from the storage area." They planned through the night. By morning, they had developed a strategy. Frank and Greg would create a diversion at the main gate, while Lisa used her codes to get John and Susan into the underground facility. "Once we have the XV-87, we'll need somewhere to modify it," John said. "I know a place," Frank replied. "An old friend owns a private airfield about 100 miles from here. He doesn't ask questions." That evening, they put their plan into action. Frank and Greg approached the main gate in a delivery truck, claiming to have an emergency supply drop. When security began questioning them, Greg triggered a small electromagnetic pulse device that shut down the base's perimeter systems. At the same moment, Lisa, John, and Susan used her access codes to enter through a service gate on the opposite side of the base. They moved quickly toward the underground storage facility. "My clearance should get us in," Lisa whispered as they reached the entrance. She swiped her card and entered a code. The door unlocked with a soft click. Inside, the facility was dimly lit and seemingly empty. They followed signs for Project Hummingbird until they reached a large hangar door. "This is it," John said, feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension. He hadn't seen the XV-87 since his last test flight 5 years ago. Lisa unlocked the door and they stepped inside. There it was, the XV-87 Hummingbird. It looked like no aircraft Susan had ever seen. Smaller than a fighter jet, its sleek body was designed to cut through air at incredible speeds while resisting crushing G-forces. Its wings could adjust position for different gravity environments. "It's beautiful," Susan whispered. John ran his hand along the craft's hull. "And deadly." The program was shut down because normal human physiology couldn't handle the stresses of flying it. 3 test pilots died during early trials. "But you could fly it," Lisa said. John nodded. "Barely. It pushed me to my absolute limit." An alarm suddenly blared through the facility. Lisa checked her device. "They've discovered the breach. We need to move." "Can you start it?" Susan asked John. He was already climbing into the cockpit. "If the systems are maintained, yes, but we can't take off from inside here." Lisa ran to a control panel. "I'll open the ceiling doors. There's an elevator platform that can raise the aircraft to the surface runway." As Lisa worked the controls, Susan joined John in the aircraft. The cockpit was tight, designed for a single pilot, but she squeezed into the small space behind the seat. "The engines still work," John said as the XV-87 systems came online. "Fuel level's good, but we can't outrun Veldari ships in this, not without modifications." The ceiling began to open above them and the platform slowly lifted the aircraft upward. As they reached the surface, they saw chaos. The diversion had worked too well. The entire base was on high alert. "I hope Frank and Greg got away," Susan said. John strapped in. "Hold on tight. This is going to be rough." The XV-87's engines roared to life. John taxied quickly to the runway, ignoring the vehicles racing toward them. With a surge of power, the aircraft accelerated. Susan felt herself, pushed back into her seat by the force. They lifted off just as military vehicles reached the runway. John pulled the aircraft into a steep climb, and Susan felt the crushing weight of acceleration. How could anyone handle this regularly? John's face showed strain, but his hands were steady on the controls. "Diverting to Frank's coordinates," he said through gritted teeth. They flew low to avoid radar, the XV-87 handling like nothing Susan had ever experienced. Its speed and maneuverability were incredible, but she could see why normal pilots couldn't handle it. The G-forces during turns made it hard even to stay conscious. An hour later, they landed at a small private airfield hidden in the mountains. Frank, Greg, and Lisa were already there, having escaped during the chaos. "You actually got it," Frank said, staring at the XV-87 with admiration. "Now comes the hard part," Greg added. "We need to modify it to take down the Veldari core ship." For the next 2 days, they worked non-stop. Greg integrated Veldari technology they had studied into the XV-87's systems. Frank installed his modified railgun beneath the aircraft's fuselage. This weapon uses electromagnetic acceleration to fire solid projectiles at speeds that should penetrate Veldari shields, Frank explained. But the recoil would tear apart any normal aircraft. "The XV-87 was built to handle extreme stresses," John said. "And in Veldari gravity, it will be even more maneuverable." Susan studied the data they had stolen. "According to this, the core ship will be in position above Washington, D.C. in 24 hours. The Veldari High Council is arriving to oversee the first phase of atmospheric alteration." "Then that's our target," John said. "We hit them when their leadership is all together." Lisa looked concerned. "Their ships have weapons that could vaporize this entire mountain." "Are you sure this will work?" John patted the XV-87's hull. "They've never faced something like this before. A weapon that combines their technology with our Deathworlder physiology, something only a human can pilot." As evening fell, they made final preparations. The modified XV-87 now looked even stranger, with the massive railgun integrated into its underside and Veldari technology enhancing its shields. "I've set up resistance cells worldwide to target the atmospheric alteration devices," Frank said. "When you hit the core ship, they'll move simultaneously." John climbed into the cockpit for a test flight. The aircraft rose smoothly into the air. He tested the weapon system, firing the railgun at a distant mountain peak. The recoil was massive, shaking the entire aircraft, but the XV-87 held together. When he landed, his face was serious. "It works, but flying this while firing the weapon will take everything I've got. No Veldari could possibly handle it." Susan met his eyes. "That's exactly why it will work. They never considered what Earth gravity has made us capable of." That night, as the others slept, John stood outside looking at the XV-87. Susan joined him. "Nervous?" she asked. He nodded. "If we fail, there won't be another chance." Susan took his hand. "You said it yourself. They're afraid of what humans can do. Tomorrow you'll show them why." Dawn broke over the mountains as John made final checks on the XV-87. The others gathered around, their faces showing a mix of hope and worry. "The Veldari core ship has moved into position above Washington, D.C., Lisa reported, checking her equipment. "Their atmospheric alteration devices are powering up across North America." Frank handed John a small radio. "Resistance cells are in position. When you hit the core ship, they'll attack the ground installations." Greg made a last adjustment to the railgun. "I've fine-tuned the targeting system. Their shields are strongest around their command center, but there's a weakness near their engine section." Susan stepped forward and gave John a small object. "I found this in the Veldari data. It's an emergency signal that identifies high-ranking officers. It might get you close enough before they realize you're not one of them." John secured the device in the cockpit and climbed in. The controls felt familiar under his hands, but the added weapons and Veldari technology made the aircraft heavier, more powerful. "Remember," Greg warned, "their gravity is about 1/3 of Earth's. The XV-87 will respond differently there, and the railgun's recoil will be massive." John nodded. "I'll handle it." Susan leaned into the cockpit. "Good luck," she said softly, then stepped back. The XV-87's engines roared to life. John taxied to the end of the runway, then accelerated. The aircraft shot forward and lifted into the morning sky. He climbed rapidly, pushing the craft to its limits. As he approached Washington, D.C., he could see the massive core ship hovering above the city. It was enormous, at least a mile long, shaped like a teardrop made of crystal and metal. Smaller Veldari craft moved around it like bees around a hive. John activated the emergency signal Susan had given him. Almost immediately, his radio crackled. "Veldari, vessel, identify yourself," a voice demanded. John didn't respond. He pushed the XV-87 faster, heading straight for the core ship. Alarms began to sound in his cockpit as Veldari defensive systems locked onto him. "Now or never," John muttered. He activated the Veldari technology Greg had integrated into the aircraft. The XV-87's hull shimmered as a shield formed around it. Energy beams from the core ship lanced out, but the shield held. John was close enough now to see details of the massive vessel. Following Greg's instructions, he aimed for the engine section. The first Veldari fighter ships appeared, moving to intercept him. They were fast and agile, but John had spent years mastering extreme maneuvers. He rolled and twisted the XV-87, avoiding their fire while maintaining his course toward the core ship. As he entered the lower gravity field the Veldari maintained around their vessels, the XV-87 became even more responsive. John felt the crushing weight of high-G maneuvers lessen. He could push the aircraft harder. A direct hit from a Veldari weapon rocked the XV-87. The shield weakened, but held. John was close enough now. He lined up his shot and fired the railgun. The recoil was enormous, pushing the aircraft backward and nearly causing John to black out. The projectile streaked toward the core ship, a blur of metal moving at incredible speed. It struck the shield and penetrated, hitting the engine section. There was no explosion, but a visible ripple ran through the core ship's hull. Its lights flickered. "Direct hit," John said into his radio. "Frank, start the ground attack." John fired again, the recoil slamming him back in his seat. His vision narrowed from the G-forces, but he fought to stay conscious. The second shot hit the same area, and this time part of the core ship's hull cracked open. Veldari ships swarmed around. Him now. John twisted and turned, using maneuvers that would kill any pilot not adapted to Earth's gravity. The Veldari seemed unable to predict his movements, their weapons firing where he had been moments before. John fired the railgun a third time. This shot struck deeper into the core ship. Suddenly, all the lights on the massive vessel went dark. It began to drift sideways. "Their main power is down." Lisa's voice came through the radio. "Communications between Veldari forces are in chaos." John circled around for another attack, but suddenly his aircraft shuddered. A lucky shot from a Veldari fighter had damaged one wing. Warning lights flashed across his control panel. He had one more shot. John aimed carefully and fired the railgun one last time. The projectile struck the command center of the core ship, shattering its crystalline structure. The XV-87's damaged wing gave way. John fought the controls as the aircraft began to spin. Below him, the Potomac River stretched out. He aimed for it, ejecting just before impact. His parachute opened and he drifted down toward the water. Above, the core ship was listing badly, its engine section venting strange energy into the atmosphere. The smaller Veldari ships flew in confused patterns, some crashing into each other without central coordination. John landed in the river and swam to shore. His body ached from the extreme G-forces he had endured, but he was alive. He looked up at the sky where the core ship now hung motionless. 2 hours later, Frank's Jeep pulled up to where John waited in a park near the river. Susan rushed out and hugged him. "It worked," she exclaimed. "All the Veldari forces are in disarray. The atmospheric alteration devices shut down when you hit their command center." Frank looked grim, but satisfied. "We've got reports from around the world. The Veldari are retreating to their ships. Without the core ship's coordination, they can't maintain their operation." "What about the people they took?" John asked. "Lisa hacked into their systems during the chaos," Greg explained. "We have their locations. Rescue teams are freeing them now." 3 days later, the remaining Veldari ships gathered in Earth orbit. A transmission was broadcast worldwide. People of Earth. Zelthron's voice was subdued. We have underestimated you. What we saw as evolutionary disadvantages, your adaptation to high gravity, your physical resilience, are in fact remarkable strengths. The Veldari Collective formally withdraws from your world. The transmission showed Zelthron standing before the damaged core ship. One human, using what we considered primitive technology combined with our own, was able to defeat our most powerful vessel. We have never encountered a species like yours before. The Veldari ships departed Earth orbit the next day, leaving behind only a small diplomatic vessel. The abducted humans were returned, shaken but alive. At a small ceremony at the White House, John stood uncomfortable in his dress uniform as the president awarded him a medal. Susan, Frank, Greg, and Lisa stood nearby, their contributions still secret but no less important. I don't feel like a hero, John said later as they sat in a quiet bar. I just did what anyone would do to protect our home. Susan shook her head. Not anyone could have flown that aircraft. The Veldari never understood what it means to evolve on a death world. They thought it made us primitive. Instead, it made us strong. Frank raised his glass. To Deathworlders, he said with a smile. As they celebrated, a new Veldari ambassador requested a meeting with human scientists. Its first question: how might our peoples learn from each other, now that we recognize your unique strengths? The flying gun that brought down an advanced alien fleet became a symbol of humanity's place in the galaxy. Not the most technologically advanced species, perhaps, but one whose evolutionary history on a challenging world had created unexpected advantages. Deathworlders, it turned out, were not to be underestimated.